This is where music would be helpful.
Good
Good
morning,
morning, Christine.
We've been
We've been waiting for you.
Now,
my goodness, my sister. Well, hello, Linda.
How
How
are you? How
How
wonderful.
wonderful. Right, seems like things are going here.
Oh,
one setting off.
Oh
well.
Forget
Facebook today.
Who
Who needs them?
You can
You
go
can go
listen
listen to the YouTube stream.
All
All
right.
right.
Good morning, everybody. I
I
hope
hope
everything is going great for you this morning.
I've got just about everything set up
here.
Let's see, Tom
is looking
dashing today.
I'm the
I'm
one
the
in
one in t-shirt today.
Usually
Usually Tom's the one that's got a t-shirt on. He's got really clever
Yoda
style
clever t-shirts on. And
today
just trying
to get all my little pictures right over here, and then I'm going to start reading.
I hope you
I
guys
hope you guys are having a wonderful week. Thursdays are usually pretty good days for me.
Get a lot
done.
All right.
Almost there.
What
What is going on?
Pardon me
for
fidgeting with
something here. I'm trying to get something right in the video.
You gotta
move
with two fingers. Take two fingers
and slide them around.
And Dean's here
with me.
There we
go.
This is Dean's
birthday week.
I had never heard
Golden Birthday before.
I learned something
new this year.
Dean was
9 on 9/9.
You gonna have
You gonna have another birthday party this weekend, buddy?
No.
You don't know?
You don't know?
Because of
Hamilton.
Hamilton got in the way.
All right. Back to the lesson. This
week.
Our
10-day
10-day
section here in the second half of the book
is
all
about
this
specific
special theme. It's
taking a
really close look
at the
idea of sin
and whether
or not it's real,
to what degree it's real, and to what degree sin can be limiting beliefs versus something that you can look at differently, learn from, and move forward
so that you don't repeat
these
kinds of things in your life, and you get rid of the patterns that slow us down, so we can accomplish more,
be
the most that we're here
to be. So special theme number 4, what is sin? Yesterday I read from the book. Today I'm going to read from Tom's notes. This is one of my favorites. What is sin?
What
The
is
central
sin? The
theme
central
for
theme for
lessons
lessons 251 through 260.
Sin is the
means that allows illusions to take the place of truth.
Sin is insanity.
Sin's a
childish
game that the Son of God plays to pretend he's something other than as God created him.
Unfortunately for us,
we've forgotten
that it is a
game of make-believe.
And now
perceive the illusion of lack, limitation, and separation to be real.
Due to our
belief that sin is real, we've become split-minded.
Our
Our split mind is delusional and insane.
We've become
unable to differentiate
between
make-believe and our true identity as our higher self.
Sin
is the home of all illusions.
Sin is the
proof
that
illusions are real,
and that the
Son of God is no longer perfect, whole, and complete. Sin is the means for insane minds to let illusions replace the truth. The body is an instrument the split mind made for the purpose of self-deception. Your ego claims the physical body is your home and that the brain is your mind. The ego uses the game token we call the body as its tool to prove that your safety and existence is contingent upon the well-being of the body. The ego claims that you're the body and the body is you. When you accept this erroneous belief, you must also accept the limitations that come with the body. The goal of the body's physical senses is to confirm and bear false witness that the illusions of lack, limitation, and separation are real. To sense is to not know. Physiologists explain that the physical senses are designed to confirm what your mind already believes to be true. The physical senses are not objective cameras to the world. Instead, they're merely thought confirmation devices. Your senses only confirm your mind's beliefs and ignore any evidence that would be contradictory. Thus, the senses fulfill their purpose of providing false evidence that supports your ego's erroneous beliefs about you, your world, and God. SIN is self-inflicted nonsense. Sin's the belief in lack. When you believe that you're not perfect, whole, and complete, you automatically accept the idea that you are missing something to make you whole. You accept the idea that you have needs that must be met if you're to be safe, happy, and survive. This belief implies there is something outside your own mind that has power over you. Sin is your acceptance of the ego's belief in lack, limitation, and separation. The ego uses the body as the means to make it appear that there are outside forces beyond your control that could make you happy or sad. The body proves you're not mind and can be hurt to the ego. The purpose of the egoic world is to bear false witness that your mind is not the source of your experiences. If your ego can prove that your mind has needs and lacks the creative ability to keep you safe, your decision maker will accept and follow your ego's plan for its own survival. The purpose of the body is to provide a vehicle the ego can use to fulfill the ego's plans for its protection, safety, and continued insanity. The body's purpose is to strive, and the ego's aim for striving is to make the false true and the true false. The body provides the means for the ego to argue for its rightness over your happiness. The body falsely proves that your ego's little s self is your reality, and that the big S self, the higher self that God created, is the illusion. Sin, guilt, and fear are interrelated. Sin, guilt, and fear compromise the unholy trinity of your egoic thought system. When you find one, you will find the other two beliefs. Sin is the belief in lack, and lack engenders fear. In the egoic world, when you commit a sin, you are coming from fear and trying to reduce or minimize the fear that you're currently feeling. Yet the only reason that you are in fear is because you believe in lack. Fear and sin, which is your belief in lack, are always coupled together. Guilt is always associated with lack in your world. All three beliefs occur in unison. You cannot escape the experience of sin, guilt, and fear without removing and healing all three of these erroneous beliefs from your delusional mind. Your ego has developed its own survival plan to ensure that its needs are met. The ego never questions its own belief in lack, limitation, and separation. That is the true source of this fictitious problem. Instead, the ego's plan always starts with the confirmation that lack is real and that there are outside forces that can directly affect your inner peace. The ego does not know who you are. The ego fails to recognize the truth that your higher self, that spark of life inside of you, that higher self has no needs. Therefore, the ego always assumes sin, lack, is real and is the problem. The ego then attempts to solve the fictitious problem of needs that only exist within the delusional mind that believes sin could be real. Assuming sin to be real, the ego's plans center around one of two possible solutions to the fictitious problem of needs and of lack. The first solution is simply just to take from another what you perceive you need. The attack could be direct or indirect, but the solution will entail some form of taking. This is based on the ego's belief that someone's loss can be another's gain. The first solution reinforces your ego's belief in separation and the reality of form. This solution embodies the belief that life is a zero-sum game. If I'm going to win, somebody else has to lose. It also flames the feelings of guilt. The second solution rests on the special relationship. A special relationship is a bartering transaction between two or more parties. Each seeks to trade some of their limited resources in exchange for something they perceive they need, which is of equal or greater value to them in their perspective. The goal of the special relationship is to get a good deal. You want to give up as little as possible while maximizing your return on investment. This special relationship also assumes that sin or lack is the reality of the world, and that both parties have needs that cannot be fulfilled solely by the creative power of each party's own mind. To ensure one gets their way, guilt becomes a favorite tool of manipulation in the special relationship. We've all experienced manipulating and being manipulated by guilt. Our ego uses the blame, shame, and guilt game very effectively to obtain its own way. Projecting guilt is often used in the special relationship as each party attempts to make the other party feel guilty for any shortcomings in the relationship. This is the world. In this world of special relationships, we often vacillate between being an active guilt catcher or a guilt thrower. Often we take turns and switch roles as the ego struggles for the rightness of its own plan. Most of you are probably familiar with the religious concept of sin. This common definition of sin would be to commit offense or fault of any kind. Depending on the religion, it may involve the breaking of religious laws or moral principles, typically through a willful act. This notion of sin implies that there is both a wrongdoer and something that has been wronged. When we look at the two solutions offered by your ego to obtain its needs, the first plan that involves the taking from another would be the sin of stealing. Yet the second plan of entering into a special relationship would be seen as an act of cooperation and not a sin, right? This one comes in through the front door. Yet both solutions are the ego's attempt to make the illusion of bodily needs become your reality. Therefore, both would meet A Course in Miracles definition of a sin because of the intention. ACIM defines sin as a means of seeking to replace the truth with an illusion. Sin is your belief in lack, limitation, and separation. It is your belief that you could be something other than as God created you. Sin is your belief that your mind is not the creative power behind your experiences, and that there are outside forces that can rob you of your inner peace and happiness. Earlier, I stated that sin, guilt, and fear are interrelated and occur simultaneously as one grouping. You can't have one without the other two occurring. Most can easily relate to the idea of guilt being associated with the common definition of sin that involves the wrongful taking from another. Yet guilt is not necessarily associated with the special relationship. Most perceive a special relationship to be a mutually agreeable transaction with each party gaining from the interrelationship. So why would I say that a special relationship automatically engenders guilt within the mind of each party? Well, on the conscious or subconscious level, when you believe you have needs, you're admitting that you're incapable of being self-sufficient. A lot of guilt is self-guilt and not directed at another party. You believe that there is something wrong with you because you are not perfect, whole, and complete. Perhaps there is something wrong with you because you allowed someone to abuse you. Guilt is a natural result from these feelings of inadequacy. You either feel guilty for your inability to provide for yourself, or you project that guilt on another for their failure to provide for your needs. Many religions have the idea of original sin, or the idea that we have offended God, and therefore are being punished and must earn our salvation. Often we blame God for what we perceive to be God's failure to create us properly, or to take in consideration our special needs. Your ego tells you that if God would have done his job properly when he created you, you would be happy or would not have messed things up later. In God, not you. It's God, not you, who is to blame. Your own self-perceived inadequacies now become God's fault. Your ego has transformed an all-powerful God of only love into a limited God of lack, stupidity, imperfection, and whim. According to our ego, if God made us perfect, we cannot trust God's plan for our happiness. God showed that he was incompetent when he created us. If we believe that we have offended or sinned against God, God cannot be pure love. Because of our ego's erroneous beliefs in a judgmental God, we must now fear God's retribution. To do our penance, or somehow earn our redemption. A God that is only love has been transformed by our egoic mind into something to hide from and fear. When the ego plans for our salvation, it's based on the idea that God's Son must earn his way back into heaven through penance or good deeds. It assumes that we are sinners and that paradise is lost. This belief that we have lost our divine birthright leads to our ego's plans to earn back God's love by our actions. With this idea that God's love could be earned, our ego has once again transformed a God of unlimited love and abundance into a God of judgment and conditional love. This is an egoic God whose conditional love and gifts can be purchased and acquired through bribes, negotiations, prayers, and good deeds. The ego's plan requires us to earn or purchase our way back into heaven. When properly understood, and if true, the ego's belief that we can do something to earn God's love would also be a sin. This is because belief implies that we could earn something that God has already given us and never taken away. When you believe that God's love can be earned, you are trying to make the illusion of lack, limitation, and separation real. Be aware that all plans that suggest you can earn your way into heaven are fear-based and keep you trapped in fear. Guard against plans that claim you can be saved or save another through good deeds or by second-party surrogates, for these plans all disempower everybody involved. Your ego's plans for your salvation only keep you trapped within the belief that paradise has been lost and sin is real. They all strive to use the body as the tool to make amends for your assumed failure as God's sinful son. Only God's plan for your salvation will work, because only God's plan accepts the innocent, guiltless, and sinless nature of God and his creations. Good people end up in their own hell because they refuse to forgive themselves for their own perceived failure to save or to make another happy. This is always an impossible task. No one has the power to make anybody else happy. To do so would deny them of their freedom to use the creative power of their own mind as they desire. You can present all the circumstances that would allow them to assume happiness, but they still have the freedom to interpret it however they interpret it. All right, that's my comment. Anyway, back to the book. You and your ego believe that the other person is too stupid to know what their own perfect plan for their reawakening should be. That only your plan, not God's plan, will work. This belief would also deny and prevent you from exercising the same freedom for yourself. Each mind alone has the power of interpretation for their own experiences. That's why they created the experience in the first place. Each one's own mind assigns all the meaning that each gives to any experience. Free yourself from your ego's belief in lack, and the sin, guilt, and fear that lack engenders will cease. There is no sin. Sin is self-inflicted nonsense. There is no lack in God, and there is none in you. Your denial of your divine birthright cannot make the illusion of lack, limitation, and fear real. Egoically, you need do nothing. Drop your egoic plans that insist on making the illusion of sin real and accept this fact. You remain as God created you. Deny your ego's belief in sin. Drop your egoic plans and insist on making the illusion of sin real and accept this fact. You remain as God created you. Deny your ego's belief in sin and reclaim your divine inheritance. All right, those are the notes on the special theme read out of Understanding A Course in Miracles workbook lessons. How to End the Blame, Shame, Guilt, and Fear with Love and Forgiveness. This is a book that took the A Course in Miracles workbook lessons that were published about 50 years ago and made them a little bit easier to read, a little bit easier to interpret, and give us something to kind of start off the day with. Today we're in lesson 258. It's the 258th day of the year. Happy 9/15. We're halfway through the month. Hope you all are having a great September. We're at lesson 258. Let me remember that my goal is God. So let's think about all the stuff that I just read, encapsulate that as a lens to look at this. Let me remember that my goal is God. It's not cuckoo, I swear. All that is needful is to train our minds to overlook all little senseless egoic aims and to remember that our goal is God. I understand, Dean. I got it. You're playing a game that makes you have to click thank you for saying something. It was a little bit distracting, but that was just the illusion of the sin I got wrapped up in, and it was just a distracting noise, a distracting thing. And fortunately, the power of my mind to be creative and still apply myself and focus in on what I'm trying to accomplish. Thank God I've got control over that. It makes it easier to forgive and easier to dispose of the ego's needless drama that's distracting us from our goal of lesson 258. Thank you for being with me on this journey. Let me remember that my goal is God. All that's needful is to train our minds to overlook all little senseless egoic aims and to remember that our goal is God. God's memory is hidden in our Big-ass selves, our higher selves, minds, obscured out by our pointless little egoic goals, which offer nothing and do not exist. Shall we continue to allow God's grace to shine in unawareness while the toys and trinkets of the egoic world are sought instead? God is our only goal, our only love. We have no aim but to remember God, our Father. Our goal is but to follow the guidance of the Holy Spirit in the way that leads to you. We have no goal but this. What could we want but to remember you? What could we seek but our identity as our higher self and your child? Amen. Notes to lesson 258. Let me remember that my goal is God. The comment is, your ego's priorities conflict with the goal of remembering God. The ego's goal is the pursuit of making the illusions of lack, limitation, sin, and separation seem more bearable. Your ego attempts to do this through special relationships that it claims has the power to make you happy or safe. The pursuits of such egoic goals only lead to pain and disappointment. Pursuing these goals makes fear and separation appear real. The idols of the ego only sidetrack us from our true purpose and function. Our goal is the acceptance of the truth that what we remain as our goal is the acceptance of the truth that we remain as God created us and are part of the indivisible one self. Our priority is to reawaken to this truth. The goal of remembering God has always remained within our minds and is kept alive by the Holy Spirit. Your reawakening is guaranteed by God Himself. When your reawakening to the truth is your only priority, your focus will be clear and you will drop all of your egoic goals and useless plans. The stress and striving you felt when you were in pursuit of your ego's meaningless goals will disappear. Hey there, Tom.
Okay, well, thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Tom.
This lesson.
What's that tapping?
Thank you, Lee. This lesson 258, says, "Let me remember that my goal is God." And what we'd like to do today, I'd like you to have a pencil and paper handy again, if you would. But what we'd like to do is explore perhaps the source of sin. They said in the theme that sin was insanity. It's based on fear, and fear is an acronym of false evidence appearing real. And sin, we could use an acronym as self-inflicted nonsense. So what we'd like to do, and in my book, Ending Fear, the 7-Hour Formula for Fearless Awakening, which approaches the concepts of ACIM, the principles, in a scientific, I'm going to say rational, non-spiritual, but practical approach to get to, I'm going to say, the truth of your own spiritual nature. One of the subchapters is talking about becoming like Socrates. Socrates was proclaimed by the ancient Greek world, at least, to be the wisest man in Athens. Now, this wasn't always the case. Socrates didn't believe himself to be the wisest man. As a matter of fact, the only thing that Socrates ever claimed to know is that he didn't know, and that he didn't know much. And it was only when he went to Delphi and was in front of the oracle at Delphi, and they proclaimed him the wisest man in Athens, he started to pick up on this idea that maybe not knowing or knowing that you don't know could have made you the wisest man. So he would return back to Athens, where he would start questioning the people that proclaim themselves to be wise and experts on a particular field. And through his questioning, he would, and the person themselves that had proclaimed themselves to be so wise, would eventually realize that through his questioning, they didn't know that they didn't know, and that they really weren't that wise, and that actually he was wiser through his questions because he was able to realize that they didn't know that much about the given subject, certainly not as much as they thought. And thus he became supposedly there was this idea that he was the wisest because he claimed he did not know. He realized that his egoic beliefs about himself, his world, may not be all there is to know. So today, what we'd like to do is to see if we can become more like Socrates and be open to the idea that maybe we don't know that we don't know. So, what I'd like you to do is to answer a few questions. And these questions, we're not going to give you a whole lot of time. So, just scribble down the first answer that comes to your mind. We don't want you to overthink this, nor to come up with some answer that you think that somebody would like or be impressed with. Just want you to answer quickly with kind of what jumps out to you. So the first question that I'd like to ask is, who are you? So write down who you are. The next question is, what are you? The third question is, where are you? The next question are, how are you? The next question is, when are you? And the final question is, why are you? okay, now you can, if you wanted to do this where you have more time, that's fine. But we just want to get some answers down. And often the question that, the answer that pops into your mind first is the right one to put down because that's the first thing that really popped up. And now what I'd like to do is to just look at that, and fear, which we said is false evidence appearing real, are one of the first things that arises from fear. And fear arises anytime we feel that we lack the creative ability to handle a given situation. Okay, if we've always felt we could handle a situation, then there's not really any fear involved. So when we define ourselves, how we define ourselves is going to be very instrumental into when we start moving into fear. If we answered the question of maybe what am I, and you said that you were for example, if I said I am Tom Wigchild living on planet Earth at this time with this physical body, how I answer these questions or have uh, important implications as to how I feel about my ability to respond in any given situation. Remember, we said fear arises any time we feel we lack the creative ability or power to handle a situation. So, how we define ourselves becomes very important. Socrates said that he was willing to accept the idea that maybe he didn't know that he didn't know what he really was, or that he didn't know all the things. Our ego argues for our rightness. And one of the things that the ego does is it makes the assumption that its beliefs are true. And therefore, it doesn't question those assumptions. And as a matter of fact, it will argue for the correctness of those assumptions, even if they are erroneous, if they're wrong, misguided, or totally inaccurate. And anyone else looking at it would view your ego's assumptions about itself to be totally wrong. They might agree, they might not, but the ego always is willing to sacrifice your happiness and your ability as a decision maker to be in control of your own inner peace for arguing for its rightness. The ego would rather have you be a claim that it's right than you be happy. This is self-inflicted nonsense. This lesson says, let me remember that my goal is God. And God, we can define God in all kinds of ways, but God has one attribute that's very important, is the truth. So God, the remembrances of God is also the remembrance of the truth of what you really are. When you define yourself in certain ways, those become your limitations. Now, what I'd like you to do is to take those answers that you had, the who, where, how, when, why, and I did, let me just ask, I don't remember. I did ask the last question, I hope was hopefully why you are. Did I ask that question? Did
Yes, you did.
somebody? Oh,
Yes, you
okay.
did.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So What I want you to do is to look at how you answered those things and see if those answers would align with the lesson of today, which is that let me remember that my goal is God. Because it says that the ego's priorities conflict with your goal of remembering God. The ego's goal is the pursuit of making the illusion of sin, lack, limitation, separation seem more bearable. Your ego attempts to go through special relationships and claim that it has the power to make you safe. It says that all that's needed is to train your mind to overlook all your senseless egoic aims and to remember that your goal is God. That's the first sentence of this lesson 258. Does the way you define yourself, who you are, where you are, when you are, how you are, why you are, did those align with the idea that you only want the truth, or you only want, and I'll say this, God's truth? And God's truth, according to the Course in Miracles, is that you be happy and that you remember the truth that you are God's child. You may perceive yourself to be a prodigal son or a child that's lost or spent or wasted your divine inheritance, but that's not how God sees you. So write down whether or not who you are, how you define those answers, how you place those answers to those questions, whether they align with the goal of remembering the truth or whether they're arguing or have embedded assumptions that make you limited, that imply that you're separate, that imply that you have needs and that you're not individuated consciousness, part of that one self. So why don't you put down whether or not that aligns, and therefore that defining how you define yourself as who, where, how, when, why, if those actually support the goal of lesson 158, which is to remember that my goal is God, the reclaiming of the truth of what you are. So take a moment and write down those things. A for align, and if they don't, then you can put impede or I or conflict. Goals depend on how you define yourself. If you defined yourself to be the body, and the body is you, that definition of how you define yourself will direct, it will limit, and it will actually uh, be a construct to what your goals can be. If I perceive myself to be the body with needs, what I will do is I will have goals that will tend to reflect bodily needs instead of recognizing the truth that I am not a body. I am free. I am still as God created me. and that nothing sources my experiences but me, and that I, as decision maker, am in control of my own inner peace unless I choose to abdicate that authority. This lesson says God's memory is hidden in our higher self's mind, but it's obscured by our pointless little egoic goals, which offer nothing and do not exist. The truth is that you as consciousness exist with or without the game token we call the body. The body is merely a space holder that we need to be able to interact on this game board of the world of perception. So, with or without a body, you still exist. The question, how are you, is an interesting one. How did you answer that? Did you see yourself as perfect, whole, and complete? Or did you see yourself as maybe struggling, in pain, suffering, maybe striving as an earner, not a learner? Did you give yourself permission to, on this game board of time and space, to choose to be happy, healthy, and abundant? Or did you say that you were a suffering little urchin stuck in poverty? If we understand that beliefs, whether we believe they came first before the experience or after, that beliefs, according to the physiologists, the psychologists, have a tremendous impact on how we relate to our physical world, we will realize the importance of how we decide we are. And we can choose things that support us. When you answer those questions of, does this support the idea of remembering God or the truth of who you are? Were all those ways you defined yourself supportive with the idea that you are God's beloved treasure? If not, this lesson and this whole theme is saying that's a sin. That's self-inflicted nonsense. It's your belief that needs to be examined, as Socrates. Realize that you do not know the truth because you're following false assumptions, perhaps indoctrinated beliefs about yourself. It says that, shall we continue to allow God's grace to shine in unawareness while the toys and trinkets of our ego's world are sought instead? Or will we remember and ask to listen to and hear the voice that God's placed inside of us to remind us and guide us back to the truth of what we are? God is our only goal, our only love. We have no aim but to remember God. This lesson ends with the prayer. Our goal is but to follow the guidance of the Holy Spirit, then the way that leads to that truth, that you are God's beloved child. You remain as God created, perfect, whole, and complete. All that you have to do is realize that truth and forgive yourself for all the self-inflicted nonsense of your limiting beliefs in lack, limitation, and separation. The belief that you, an effect, could somehow change the cause, God, and somehow transform how God had created you, perfect, whole, and complete. Today, as decision maker, we have no goal but this, the goal of remembering God, that we remain God's treasure. What could we want but to remember that truth? We're not the body. We're free. Even in time's space, we can be or imagine anything we want. And this world, this game world, can become a fun, exciting experience where we hone our skills and recognize the truth of what we really are, that Christ. What would we seek but our identity as our higher self and your perfect child? So today, look at these ideas of how you defined yourself. And if you wish and you want to take it to perhaps the next level, you might want to ask, how would you have to answer these questions so that they aligned with the truth and then move you more on the path to recognizing your oneness and that your will is the same as God's will, which is only that you are happy and reclaim the truth that you remain God's treasure, the prodigal child returning back and embracing and being embraced in the arms of unconditional love and total acceptance. Create a great day for yourself and your world. Namaste. Thank you. The God in me recognizes the God in you.
Well, good morning, my friends. I am. Thank you, Tom, for everything that you do. I gotta increase that as this cycle, this school cycle, it's early for my daughter to rock to school. So for me, it's a challenging time now. So I haven't been able to do the exercises, but I will do it in the replays. And the questions that you made this morning, Tom, are really powerful because now I can have a first response more from the spiritual side than from the level of the form, and that created a different perception of myself. So it's wonderful, and it was from one question that I got a curious answer. I think it was the one that it wasn't what I am. It was well, I gotta review the replay to go back to that and work with myself in that because it had a response. The immediate response that I had in my brain was like, "Whoa, an error!" Like yeah, you come from an error or something like that. I don't remember the question, but I said no, that's not true. So there's something there that it needs to be reviewed in my mind. So it's very interesting this exercise that you did. Thank you. And if anybody wants to share something, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in regards to the exercise, the questions are things that we really fail to examine. We just assume that we know where we are or what we are. So what we want to become Socrates, like Socrates, and start questioning those ideas. Like, for example, the somebody might answer, "What am I?" I might say, "My name. I'm Tom Wakechild," or whatever. But what does that mean? And so, what this is just let's examine those things and start questioning the truth. Because what the Socrates did was question those assumed answers. And what he found was that when we start digging deeper, we start realizing that the answer that we were operating under might be erroneous, it might be very superficial. And by becoming aware of that, especially now with what science is saying and the power of our beliefs to impact our world and how we relate to it, we need to be cognizant that our beliefs are default mechanisms that limit our experiences. And that if we realize that, we'd be much more guarded about those beliefs. To just assume that because somebody said, "Hey, you're your body and the body is you," maybe that's true, but maybe it's not. And what if it isn't? And what if you explored the possibility, kind of like the allegory of the cave, Plato's allegory, where you came out of the cave and realized that there's a whole different world out there that you weren't privy to. So that's what we're trying to do, is open up the possibility and start chipping away on the egoic belief that it knows the truth of what you are, and therefore you should not chip away at the ego's false beliefs that place limitations in this idea of fear and sin and guilt that's so predominant in its embedded assumptions about what you are. Thank you.
Well, yesterday we had a beautiful conversation with Tamara and Janine, and Andy was there for a while too. And the conversation kind of reflects this lesson that I had. I mean, the conversation that we had yesterday reflects this lesson. Let me remember that my goal is God. I was talking about this kind of moment that when you are applying the course in your life and now you're understanding that everything is a symbol of the existence of God, then your ego will try to even use that on his behalf, on its behalf, because the ego will say, yeah, as everything are symbols of God, then you don't need to do nothing, right? So you don't do nothing and you don't create anything because you think that God will show you the way every single time. And that is true. You will always be guided and you will always going to be in your right path. But the thing is that if you use your spirituality to actually not use the gift that was given to you, that it's the creation itself, then you're gonna be kind of lost in life. You're gonna start to create a cycle of separation again, where you don't feel like doing something in this world, and you will feel worthless in a way. So the thing about the Course in Miracles is that you don't get to change anything outside, but inside of you. And as you understand that everything it's a symbol of the existence of God, that means that you are the existence of God. And if you don't use your power for creation and enjoy it instead of doing it out of a heroic feeling that you need to save somebody or something or do the best or be perfect, then then you're going to, well, spiral down again to the ego path, right? So that gave us this life, and this life comes with this beautiful gift that is creation. So instead of us waiting, and I said this because that was something that I was kind of experiencing myself, like do something that you like, create something that you really like you feel expansion instead of pressure. Because everything that you do out of pressure or the sense of lackness in others, it will create uh, more situations of competition or struggle or yeah, stress. So what God is in everybody and in everything. So is in you. The nature of our true self is creation, in fact. So what do we want to create, and are we going to enjoy it or not? We were created unique, individuated aspects of that very same light that it's God. So we are human beings, yeah, but we are all different because we think that we are apart. So we all, but out of fear, and now the Holy Spirit is teaching us that we can be the source outside the source in God, from love, from peace, to bring love into this world. And you can only do that if you do something that you like. Yesterday, exercise that Tom gave us was amazing because it gave you a very, very good tool of observation of the reasons what you're doing in this life. And it gives you an opportunity to just question those processes that you're having with your day. And you may find that maybe you do love what you do, but maybe your mind was placed in a competition mode or a heroic mode, and therefore you don't get to feel fluid while you're doing it. So it gives you the opportunity to reframe your mind in order for you to not change things outside of you, but change your perspective of it. One single phrase can be seen from fear or from love. I was talking the other day about this huge kind of core belief that I found around me and in me, that it's that love takes advantage. If you see love takes advantage from fear, of course you will never will want to feel in love, or you will be really hesitant to give it all to the person that is in your interest, sorry, and you will have a very special relationship with others and with things around you if you think that love takes advantage in a fearful mode. But if you take that very same phrase, love takes advantage of love. Love takes advantage of love to give, to expand. Love cannot separate anything, it only expands itself. So you can see that the very same phrase, that it's a core belief, can be seen differently, and you will experience different engagement with it. Love takes advantage because love knows what love is. So, of course, it will take advantage of everything because everything is abundant. Nothing is there to be uh, scarcity or lackness. Everything that is around you, it's made in the essence of love. So, love can take advantage because love needs to expand. Well, love can only expand. So you can see the very same phrase in two ways. And therefore, let me remember that my goal is God, is us giving us the opportunity not to change anything, stop doing things outside of you, and observe the engagement or the entanglement that you have with those, and observe if that those kind of engagement are coming from fear or from love itself. Love is all caring, all giving, all yeah, it's expansion. So if you are facing a situation where you have to make decisions, the question that Tom always repeats to us is very powerful. What would love have me do? What would love have me do? If I were to love, because actually we don't think that we are the full extension of love yet. If if I could imagine that I was love, the love itself, what would love have me do? What would love do in a specific circumstance? And you move your life, and you will take action from that mindset, and not the mindset of I'm going to be taken advantage of. So it's more like I'm going to be take advantage for. I mean, I'm going to take advantage for love. And take advantage could be seen in a dualistic mode. Everything can be seen in a dualistic mode, but you can have the thought process in reverse in that sense, so you can see only God and you can move freely. The world is full of opportunities and avenues for you to just walk through this life with your higher perspective of things, because we're still in this body, right? So it gave me this sense like, yeah, I was lacking a little bit of that part of the process where I can recognize that I have the power of creation and I can use it without thinking that I can make a mistake. Because if I am learning this, I can create things and just be open to be directed, be guided, and yeah, and to move forward with the variations that can have from the interaction on others or on my reality, and it all will be good. But you have to use your power of creation in order for you to experience this goal that is God. So I want to share that.
Well, what you're talking about, Adriana, is providence in a way. It's the idea that when you're in a fork in the road and you have a choice of left or right, there's a couple of ways of making the decision. You can let your logical brain pound on, all the different aspects of one trail versus another, or we could arrest our ego and go with, what does it feel like? What path does it feel like, the path of God? And love is one way of putting it. And, I think that, sometimes people interpret love as the floaty butterfly love. And, what I think of love in that context is, you know, what what is life? What is God? What is providence trying to tell me? And sometimes those directions and the paths that I go down are not my choice. And this is going to sound funny. It's my choice not to make it my choice. And when I say that, I mean, like I was saying, there's the logical brain kind of chewing on something. And then there's a kind of fear-based decision-making tree. What am I afraid of? And then there's a guilt-based, rearward looking decision tree. And those usually yield something that is an egoic outcome. But if I really want God in my life, I will let go of the reins. I will walk down the path. And, if it is a Saturday and going out hiking, or instead of going out shopping, it just, one is with nature and the other is inside. And the same thing holds true when there's a path that is difficult. And, sometimes, we don't want to walk down those difficult paths. And, God puts things in our life that, we may ask, why would God do this to me? Why would God expose me to such a violent event that I would need to seek a different kind of therapy? And, the answer is that that path is much harder than I thought it was. And that path is not something that I would have naturally chosen. And so God makes the decision for me. My ego could have just as easily stepped in there and said, nope, you don't need to go down that path. You don't need to do this. You're going to cause fear. You're going to cause anguish, so on and so forth. But some of the biggest rewards in life come from some of the larger struggles. That's when, for me, people think of spiritual awakening as rainbows and unicorns. Sometimes spiritual awakening is the recognition of the Father in every action that we do or don't decide. And it's like, life is a river. We have a couple of choices. We can swim upstream, get some good exercise and stay in the same place, or we can go with the river and swim across. Sure, we may be a couple 100 feet down the river, but the flow got us there, and it got us to the point on that shore that was decided, and not by us, but by a power that we were swimming in. And it's recognized in that flow of God, recognized in that flow of energy, and letting go of the ego, letting go of the decision tree in your brain, and just feeling what is the decision rather than thinking what is the decision. And when we make that space, not only can beautiful things come in our life, people, places, and things, but also decisions and, arresting our perceptions about, what sort of feeling do I have when I think of being with this friend, for example, and or this friend. And, what happens is those friends come in your life when you need them. And if they're not in your life, reach out. And, if they don't come back, let them go. And I'm not talking about any friends on this call. I'm just saying in general, that the people that are in your life are supposed to be in your life. The challenges that you're having, you're supposed to be having. There is a certain amount of discomfort that spurs one on to the next level of spirituality. And that discomfort is just as important as the love and as the warmth of the presence. And it's not just all positive from a definition of what is positive. What it is providence, what is supposed to happen. And am I being open enough and not judgmental, not preordained, not prejudged, but being in the moment and truly in that moment, not bringing the past in, not bringing the future in. And those sorts of things of the past and the future are actually known in the psychological world as cognitive distortions. So even the psychological world recognizes that forward leaning or rearward leaning decisions aren't healthy for the brain. And that's just from a psychological perspective, let alone a spiritual perspective. So look up cognitive distortions when you get a chance and see if you're truly being in the present moment with the way that your brain thinks. Thanks. Am I connected or I'm talking to myself? I apologize.
No, you are connected. I
Okay.
was disconnected. You are connected, but I lost you, but because I'm moving around the house, so I was. But I do want to thank you because you did put in a very more poetic words the thing that I was trying also to express. So thank you very much. It was beautiful what you just said. And yes, everything that happens around us, it has to happen like that because your ego is not the ruler of the world, it's God. But in that sense, you are a source outside the source. So yeah, you have to go through life understanding that everything is one and that everything is guided, and you will always find a way for a higher consciousness, but you have to do the job of observing your mind position on those aspects that you mentioned before, because in that observation is where the key is to open your heart and work with your heart instead of your belief systems. The belief systems that you have in your brain are coming from your past experiences, not only from your family in this life